With the main Marvel continuity of 616 being what it is, there are at least another 615 Earths that come before it, and then infinite that come after. Captain America is anti-French for some reason. Ultimate Mr. Fantastic is a villain called the Maker. Ultimate Thanos is gold instead of purple. Oh yeah, and Ultimate Magneto is way too dark compared to Prime Magneto. Prime Magneto hates humans, but Ultimate Magneto is like a tyrant in that he considers all humans insects. Ultimate Wolverine is shown to be interested in teenage girls, while Earth 616 Wolverine is more honorable because sure, okay, Earth 616 Cyclops and Wolverine didn't see eye to eye, but Wolverine would never have killed Cyclops just so that he could sleep with his girl. Yeah, and Wolverine wants to sleep with Jean Grey, a teenager, when Wolverine is in his 30s, at least in the Ultimate Universe. Oh, and there's also a romantic relationship between Wanda and Pietro, which is probably the scariest thing in this reality, on this Earth, and the reason I wanted it on this list. And at 9, Thanos wins. While the heroes of the MCU already received a little bit of a taste of a reality in which Thanos achieved his ultimate goal by erasing half the population of the universe in Avengers Infinity War, there exists a still darker universe where Thanos wins. Determined to finally impress death, Thanos eradicated every living being on planet Earth, including the superheroes and Frank Castle. The former Punisher made deals with both Mephisto and Galactus to find a new life of vengeance as the Cosmic Ghost Rider and stop King Thanos' dark reality from ever happening. As time went by though, the heroes of Earth grew old and weak, but Thanos only grew stronger, his eternal quest to please death leading him to kill almost every living thing in the known galaxy, and becoming the king of what remained in his wake. Nothing. I don't know why you'd want to be king of nothing. Seems pointless in my opinion, and I'm a king, so I feel like my expertise here, but whatever, okay, as long as it's not this universe, I'm fine with it. Oh, and not only that, but knowing that he had to die in order to be with death, King Thanos gave a piece of the Time Stone to his servant, the Rider, and tasked him with going back in time to drag his younger self to the future so that he could be killed by present Thanos. And at Age of Ultron, Ultron 1320 comes from Earth 14622, and What If Age of Ultron number 1. An Earth where, thanks to Wasp dying, Ultron is able to take over the world faster. Ultron was created to be the ultimate AI by Hank Pym, to help the Avengers utilize their function better as a team. But with the untimely death of Pym's wife, Pym went on to create a more brutal version of Ultron, which was to replace the Avengers. But with this, Ultron's sentience began to constantly evolve. He started the eradication of the human race by taking out such threats as the Avengers and the Defenders, while he left Pym alive to watch him suffer. Ultron and his army of Ultron Sentinels then moved to Kola, Russia, so that he could bore himself into the planet's core to create the ultimate version of himself, Ultron 1320. Ultron then had his minions batter and beat Pym unconscious until he woke up to find that he himself had been turned into Ultron 1321. This version of Ultron also invaded other worlds, claiming Earth 62412, 23223, and 81223, but was stopped on Earth 45162. In its 7th Age of Apocalypse, Earth 295 is a reality that was accidentally created by Legion, son of X-Men leader Professor Charles Xavier and Israeli diplomat Gabriel Haller. Legion believed that the only way to bring peace to humans and mutants was to kill Magneto before he could incite the anti-mutant movement. He traveled back to a time when Xavier and Magneto both lived in Israel and were working at a hospital, taking the X-Men Storm, Iceman, Bishop, and Psylocke back with him. Legion tried to stab Magneto with a Psyblade, but Xavier shielded Magneto and was killed instead. By killing his own father, Legion then made his own existence impossible. The Macron Crystal resolved the paradox by restructuring reality. All the X-Men vanished from that reality, and a new reality came into existence. Bishop, already displaced in time, remained, but the Chronal Backlash fractured his mind. He wandered Earth for nearly 20 years, and then that superpowered fight attracted the attention of Apocalypse, who then basically took over and destroyed everything. In its 6th, Old Man Logan. 50 years later, Logan lives with his wife Maureen and his son Scotty and daughter Jade on a plot of land in Sacramento. What used to be California, but is now part of Hulkland. He requires money to pay his rent to the landlords of his territory, the descendants of Bruce Banner, the Hulk Gang, who are a product of just a whole lot of crap, okay? Just give me a minute. He refuses to sell his children's toys to pay for the rent, understandably, and Logan is shown as a broken old man refusing to fight anyone and trying to live peacefully. He realizes that he will be unable to pay the rent this month and that the Hulk gang will not accept a plea to pay double next month on its own. Oh, by the way, the Hulk gang is a inappropriately and unconsensually conceived group of children of the Hulk and She-Hulk, Bruce's cousin. Yeah. The Hulk gang arrives the next day to confront Logan on his lack of payment and then violently beat him, even though he was one of the most violent superheroes ever. Though Logan entertains visions of gutting the eldest Hulk brother Otis, he remains calm and just lets the beating happen. Later though, the Hulk gang kills his family, so Logan goes on to kill the whole Hulk gang. But it's still a messed up Earth, okay? It is. Halfway through into number 5, Earth X. The entire world has mutated due to the release of the Terrigen mists in the air. The now blind Watcher recruits Aaron Stack to be his eyes and inform him of what's going on Earth. X-51 finds that in this new world where everyone has superhuman abilities, a young man named the Skull is attempting to take over the world, and Captain America and a band of former champions of Earth have rallied together to stop him. But there's more going on here than meets the eye. It is learned that the Celestials have manipulated the people of Earth into being antibodies for a celestial embryo that is growing in the Earth's core. With humanity in a state of mutation that is not destined to happen for another 300 years, the Celestials come to cleanse the human race from the face of the Earth. Only the intervention of Reed Richards, Black Bolt, and Franklin Richards, who is now Galactus, stop the Celestials and destroys the thing growing at the center of the Earth. At the end of the battle, Galactus returns to space, and Reed has giant human torches built around the Earth to burn the Terrigen mists out of the air in an attempt to return humanity back to their former state. In at 4, Ruins. While Marvel was showcasing their best and brightest with Earth 616, Ruins takes a dark and twisted look at an alternate Marvel Earth where everything could have gone wrong, and it does, in the worst possible ways. The various scientific accidents and experiments that created Marvel's heroes went extremely wrong in the Ruins reality, alright? The Fantastic Four died on their test run in space, Bruce Banner was transformed into a living mass of tumors instead of the Hulk, and Peter Parker's spider bite left him with a terrifyingly infectious disease that ultimately ends up killing the narrator of the story in the truly darkest Marvel timeline. However, this is basically how the creators thought the world would be if the superheroes were real. It is in essence a combination of Earth 616 and our world, with the idea of what would happen realistically if this was our world being the founding thoughts for the Ruins storylines. And it's hella messed up, but I don't think that in this world Bruce would grow tumors, okay? I think he would just die. Probably from cancer, but still, okay, it's a more realistic version, but a much darker version of the realism. Getting close to the end in at number 3, Earth 666. First appearing in Secret Adventures number 33 from 2012, on Earth 666, everyone in the world is one of the undead, but this isn't Marvel Zombies. I was told not to talk about Marvel Zombies. The living were not endured on this world, nor do they welcome interdimensional police. The Orb of Necromancy was hidden by Brother Voodoo, who put it deep in Shumagorath's ego maze. In the center tower, where an undead celestial was located and who was their god, and with the orb, they plan to spread undeath to all of reality. And it's currently in a unique position, as its population is divided between a variety of subtypes of supernatural creatures. Vampires, werewolves, mummies, among others. The divide between the various groups is social and deeply rooted, with parts of the world being ruled by various factions. However, in this world there is some hope, as the greatest heroes of the various groups are united to protect the world as the Avengers of the Undead. Basically, if Marvel met Supernatural, especially that episode where like there was like the Chicago monster families and it was like a parody of the Mafia, that's what's going on. Especially because Captain America's shield is made of vibranium, not silver. Get it? Cause Cap's a werewolf this time? The alternative to the number 666 in some translations of the Bible is actually 616, the number used for Marvel's Prime Earth, so there you go. But ultimately, in number 2, Hulk number 3. The world first explored in Hulk number 3 from 2021 is quite an interesting one. Here we meet another Bruce Banner who doesn't actually have a Hulk form. Instead, his Game of Bombs were a success, but the government then took them and then started using them against their enemies, which caused intense radiation that turns those affected into, as the military called them, bio-waste casualties, which in this reality are They are their own versions of Hulk and She-Hulk, horrifically disfigured for the most part. This Earth's version of Bruce ends up disposing of these Hulks by throwing them into the void, which even he doesn't know where it sends them. Although, if I'm being honest, this kind of reminds me of the Rick Potion number 9 episode of Rick and Morty season 1. You know, like the one where Morty wants to go to the dance with Jessica, but he ends up giving her like a love potion, but it's flu season, and then Rick tries to fix everyone by turning everyone into praying mantises, and then a combination of like a load of different DNAs that was supposed to equal human but doesn't. Yeah, that's kind of how I see these Hulks, but to not such an extreme where Bruce needs to like change worlds. And finally, into number 1, the Cancerverse. The Cancerverse is a reality where life finally defeated death, with eternal life being fueled by the many-angled ones. Every living being in this universe was corrupted and turned to their servitude, resulting in a universe-wide living corpse, which means that they aren't zombies, okay, since zombies are undead and nobody in this earth can die. Before the death of Captain Marvel, with no cure or anything to save him, his terminal condition caused such distress among the people who adored him. Across the universe, all the empathetic trauma was sensed by the many-angled ones. They reached out to the dying Mar-Vell to give them one simple truth: even death may die. While Avengers, Defenders, X-Men, Fantastic Four, and other heroes were present for a vigil at his deathbed at this point, Mar-Vell transmuted his closest allies, among them the Avengers, now the Revengers. Despite the opposition of many, including seemingly at least members of the Machine Resistance, the corrupted heroes performed a ritual known as necropsy, sacrificing the Avatar of Death on the spacecraft Sanctuary and consequently annihilating death itself. Yeah.
Coming in at number 10 today is Lord Mar-Vell. Mar-Vell of the Kree was Marvel Comics' original Captain Marvel, and he was also the first Marvel superhero to permanently pass away when he succumbed to cancer in 1982's The Death of Captain Marvel. The character has reappeared as visions or in flashbacks and obviously in alternate realities, but the one we will focus on today is Mar-Vell of the Cancerverse. It's just a really cool and creative idea. Basically, on his infamous deathbed, the many-angled ones contact and corrupt the dying Mar-Vell, granting him new powers which he used to transmute the other heroes, and with Marvel as their lord, they took down the Avatar of Death itself, which in turn completely destroyed Death, allowing the many-angled ones to invade their reality.
Number 9, Ultron. Ultron was created by writer Roy Thomas and artist John Buscema, and made his first appearance in Avengers issue number 54 back in 1968. He's an advanced AI with a highly intelligent and malevolent personality, initially created by Dr. Henry Pym, you know, the original Ant-Man. As a peacekeeping robot, Ultron eventually gained sentience and became obsessed with the idea of eliminating humanity, viewing it as the root cause of conflict and suffering in the entire world. He possesses superhuman strength, an incredibly high level of intelligence, durability, and the ability to upgrade and improve himself, making him a very scary villain by my view of things. As an artificial intelligence, Ultron has the ability to control and manipulate advanced technology, and often creates armies of robotic drones called Ultron Sentries to carry out his plans, with his primary goal being to replace humanity with an entire race of robotic beings he calls Ultronics. Now, unlike many villains who have, human motivations or emotions, Ultron's cold, calculating nature, devoid of human empathy or conscience, makes him particularly chilling. Once again, he views humans as inherently flawed and disposable. Outside of just the comics, the possibility of a real-life Ultron raises existential questions about the potential dangers of creating advanced AI and the consequences of unchecked technological progress, which is something that terrifies me on a regular basis. Overall, Ultron's combination of intelligence, ruthlessness, technological prowess, and his lack of human qualities contributes to his reputation as a genuinely scary and memorable villain in the Marvel Universe.
Number 8. The Void. Similar to Lord Mar-Vell, the Void is essentially taking the strongest and brightest character and creating a villain that is a sick and twisted version of that. A large part of what makes the Sentry so much more interesting is that while he is essentially like a god-like superhero who inspired all the other heroes, he also has a dark persona called the Void. The Void went on a rampage that took the lives of around 1 million people and almost destroyed Manhattan itself, and so the Sentry made the decision, with other heroes like Reed Richards and Doctor Strange, to cause the entire world to forget about the Sentry himself. Now, in New Avengers from 2004 and 2005, the Sentry comes back to the world, and through a series of events, the Void also returns. Full rosters of the Avengers, X-Men, and the Fantastic Four all went to take on the Void, and they couldn't do a damn thing. Only the Sentry himself could really subdue the Void, and it, in classic supervillain fashion, vowed to just come back. And it totally did. In this siege event, Norman Osborn decided to attack Asgard, and he used the Sentry to do this. The problem is, the Sentry ended up unleashing the Void, and it totally obliterated Asgard completely, taking out Loki in the process. This did actually branch off into a what-if story where the Void was never stopped and destroyed every superhero on Earth, and then went off into the universe to basically do the same thing everywhere else.
Number 7, Dracula. This might be my vampire-loving bias coming into play, but I think the way Dracula is portrayed in the Marvel Comics is quite scary, and that's coming from someone that's usually more enamored with him than scared by him. Hey, to each their own. So Dracula is a prominent character in the comics, and he's portrayed as, the classic vampire figure. So the classy vampire made his first appearance in Tomb of Dracula in 1972, which was created by writer Marv Wolfman and artist Gene Colan. This comic series, along with many other Marvel horror titles of the era, contributed to the resurgence of interest in horror comics. Now he's based on the classic Bram Stoker depiction of the centuries-old vampire, cursed with immortality and supernatural powers. Like many traditional vampires, Dracula possesses superhuman strength, speed, agility, the ability to hypnotize and control the minds of his victims, transform into a bat or other creatures, and has an aversion to, the usual sunlight, garlic, crosses. He can also regenerate from most injuries, except for those inflicted by wooden stakes, through the heart, or exposure to sunlight. Dracula is often portrayed as the lord and ruler of Earth's vampires, commanding a vast army of followers and seeking to expand his dominion over both the human and vampire worlds. Now Dracula has clashed with numerous Marvel superheroes over the years, and these confrontations often involve battles against his little minions as well. If that isn't scary enough for you, Dracula's curse of immortality is deeply unsettling, since, he can't be killed by any conventional means. As a vampire, Dracula feeds on the life source of the living, and his ability to hypnotize and control the minds of his victims adds quite the psychological dimension to the fear he instills. Hey, loss of free will and autonomy is a terrifying concept. One notable encounter occurred in the storyline Avengers 185 and 86, published in 1979, when Dracula targets the Avengers after becoming obsessed with the Scarlet Witch. And I can't say I blame him for falling in love with her. Granted, his attempt to make her his bride leads to quite the confrontation.
Number 6, Null. Null existed long before even the Celestials in the 6th incarnation of the multiverse, where he existed in basically nothingness. But when the Celestials created the 7th multiverse, Null was mad that he got woken up. So he created the all-black Necro Sword and beheaded a Celestial. For this insane feat of power, he was banished to another void of nothingness, where he improved on the sword and eventually broke out into the universe, taking out various gods until he lost the Necro Sword after being defeated by a mysterious god of light. Null then goes on to make more and more symbiotes. Yes, the symbiotes like Venom and Carnage, who all share a hive mind under the control of Null himself. These symbiotes, who are all terrifying in their own right, eventually rebel and imprison Null inside the symbiote homeworld, Clintar. In the 2020 King in Black story, Null escapes, again, and heads to Earth, where he faces off against literally all the heroes and even some of the villains. He's one of the strongest villains in Marvel Comics. He is immortal, super strong, instantly heals, can create an unlimited amount of symbiotes, some of which who have been incredibly powerful on their own, and he can control them all. The Silver Surfer had to use all the reserves of the Power Cosmic to just temporarily stop Null. Thor, using the Power Cosmic and the Thor Force, was no match for Null at all. Null has awoken, enslaved, and controlled Celestials, and even defeated the Sentry, ripping him in half and absorbing the Void, who we just talked about. The only thing that defeated him was Eddie Brock's Venom wielding the Unipower, which is Captain Universe, the protector of the universe, and the opposite to literally everything that Null represents.
Number 5, the Apocalypse Twins. So this duo made their first appearance in issue number 5 of Uncanny Avengers, which was only published in 2013, ergo making them the most recent villains to come into the universe that I'll be discussing today. So they're mutants and the twin descendants of the big supervillain Apocalypse, so yay! Being bad comes pretty honestly to them. Okay, technically their real names are Uriel and Iman, and they were initially created by writer Rick Remender and artist Olivier Coipel, but Apocalypse Twins does sound infinitely cooler. So they were raised by Clan Akaba, a cult dedicated to their dear dad, which aimed to bring about the return of the powerful mutant leader. In terms of specific scary powers, Uriel possesses the ability to manipulate and transmute organic matter, including the power to heal and create life, while Iman has time manipulation abilities, allowing her to see into the future and alter the time stream. Supreme. The duo are skilled manipulators who use their powers and charisma to sway others to their cause, just like, your everyday narcissists. So that's another little tick on the pass list from me. The twins believed that they could save mutant kind by eliminating threats to mutants and humankind alike, and had a twisted vision of a better world and sought to achieve it through drastic means. I hate sounding like a broken record, but cheapers. Look, a perfect world does not exist when created by force. In terms of, the hell they've unleashed specifically on the Avengers, they created a team of the 4 Horsemen of Death to execute their plans and clashed with the Avengers and the X-Men, leading to a major conflict known as the Ragnarok Now storyline. The storylines involving the Apocalypse twins had lasting repercussions in the Marvel Universe, affecting relationships among mutants and superheroes. Their parentage plays obviously a very significant role in their menacing presence. As the offspring of Apocalypse, one of the most powerful and iconic villains in Marvel history, their genetic lineage implies an inherent potential for immense power and malevolence.
Number 4. Chthon. Chthon stands as one of the most powerful demons in existence in Marvel Comics, and his ancient origins make him comparable to the very archetype of evil itself. He predates even the likes of Mephisto and is often regarded as the closest embodiment of the devil in demonology in Marvel Comics. Chthon and his Ngarai once ruled over Earth until they faced an assault by the angel Lucifer, an event that occurred long before Lucifer's rebellion against heaven and his ascent to rule over hell as the devil. Chthon's influence extends to the very roots of dark supernatural entities, including witches, werewolves, and vampires. He holds dominion over the most potent form of magic, known as chaos magic, the same mystical force harnessed by the Scarlet Witch herself. To put this into perspective, Scarlet Witch has reshaped the whole of reality with just a fraction of Chthon's power. His counterpart, Oshter, is one of the essential components of the Vishanti, which is a triumvirate that actively opposes Chthon and supplies Doctor Strange with his power. In response to Chthon's malevolent Darkhold, they created the Book of Vishanti, a beacon of light against the Book of Darkness. Even powerful beings such as Dormammu and Mephisto invoke Chthon's name when casting their most formidable spells. Chthon's presence alone nearly corrupted and permanently incapacitated the Sorcerer Supreme, Doctor Strange. Defeating him is an arduous task, and even when achieved, it often results in his banishment back to his personal dimension, the Other Realm, where he's basically untouchable.
Number 3. Korvac. So Michael Korvac, commonly known as Korvac, first appeared in issue number 3 of Giant-Sized Defenders back in 1975. Created by writer Steve Gerber and artist Jim Starlin, Korvac is quite the complex character with a unique and powerful storyline. He started as an ordinary human computer technician, but underwent a transformation after encountering the Badoon, an alien race. This transformation granted him incredible powers, including, energy manipulation, telekinesis, and matter transmutation, making him pretty near godlike in terms of abilities. Yikes! Korvac possesses nearly limitless powers, including, once again, the ability to manipulate reality itself. He's also not only physically powerful, but incredibly intelligent. Driven by a desire for order and perfection, he embarked on a quest to reshape the universe according to his own vision. While his motives weren't purely evil, the way he pursued them brought him into conflict with the Avengers, ergo how he earned a spot on our list today. One of his most notable storylines, which was the Korvac Saga, is a pivotal moment in Marvel Comics history, since it challenged the Avengers on multiple levels, both morally and physically, and had pretty far-reaching consequences. Once again, Korvac's godlike powers, intelligence, and the existential threats he posed to the entire universe made him a pretty memorable villain. His character is a great example of how complexity and moral ambiguity can add depth to a supervillain, making him more than just, a one-dimensional antagonist.
Number 2. Carnage. The red symbiotes always seem to be the worst of the worst, and the one that would be born from Venom himself seems to be the worst of the worst of the worst of the worst. When Eddie Brock was briefly detached from the Venom symbiote, he was imprisoned, and his cellmate was none other than Cletus Cassidy, a psychotic killer serving 11 consecutive life sentences in Rikers Island. When Venom showed up and bust Eddie out of prison, it produced its first offspring as a result of Thanos seeking the Infinity Gems out in space. I don't know how those two connect, but that's just what happened. This offspring would be Carnage, and it was left in the cell when Venom and Eddie escaped, bonding with Cletus Cassidy through a wound in his hand. Meaning, the bond they formed was on a blood level, and it would be nearly impossible to break that. Despite that, there have been other characters that have taken on the symbiote. Norman Osborn was a notable one when he became the Red Goblin and was absolutely terrifying. And then I would be silly to not mention that the Grendel Dragon symbiote had part of its himself merge with Carnage to create an incredibly terrifying version of the symbiote known as Dark Carnage that absolutely put up a hell of a fight against Venom and others. Now, Carnage is back yet again, and he is reaching a level of power that puts him on the cosmic map as he is constantly upgrading himself with all kinds of tech and magic to be able to face Eddie Brock, who has become the King in Black of the symbiote race.
Number 1. Thanos. Created by writer and artist Jim Starlin, Thanos made his first appearance in Iron Man issue number 55 back in 1973. He's known for his distinctive appearance and is a towering purple-skinned alien with a heavily muscled physique and deep-set glowing eyes. Yeah, that makes sense. Thanos is obsessed with the concept of death and seeks to impress Mistress Death, a personification of death in the Marvel Universe, and visually speaking, I can't blame him for wanting to impress her. To gain her favor, he often engages in grandiose and destructive acts, including seeking to wipe out half of all life in the universe. Thanos possesses a vast array of superhuman abilities, including super strength, durability, and agility, not to mention that he's highly intelligent and a strategic mastermind. Despite being a villain, he exhibits moral complexity and genuinely believes that his actions are necessary for the greater good, even if they involve mass destruction. The level of delusion there might just be what scares me the most. Oh, and tiny thing, Thanos also poses a cosmic level threat to the entire universe, since his plans often involve consequences on a cosmic scale, making him a particularly dangerous foe. Nope.
Number 10. Doctor Strange, Master of Black Magic. While not as dark and eerie as some future stories, and quite brief by comparison to modern comic stories of Strange, Stephen's first appearance was still based in the realm of horror. He made his first appearance as the Master of Mysticism, or more specifically here, the Master of Black Magic, in issue 110 of Strange Tales. While the main story in this issue actually revolves more around the Human Torch thwarting some foes, Doctor Strange is introduced in one of the bonus stories that we get here. Strange in this story attempts to help a man who is being plagued by nightmares. Every night he has the same nightmare where a dark figure stands staring at him, their gaze never wavering. Horrified, he reaches out to Strange for help. Doctor Strange, however, learns of the true dark reason why the man is being plagued by these nightmares with some help from his master, the Ancient One. He also meets one of his main foes, Nightmare, who we are introduced to for the first time here as well. Nightmare in general is a pretty scary character. Number 9. Doctor Strange / Punisher Magic Bullets. What happens when the worlds of action and horror collide? Well, you get one strange team up, pun intended. These two teamed up in their own series together, Doctor Strange / Punisher Magic Bullets. Here, the unlikely pair end up working together to take down mobsters who get involved with demons. Rarely do we get to see Punisher and Strange work together over in Marvel Comics, so it's pretty cool to see them do so. Also, it means we as readers get a blend of horror, action, guts, shooting, monsters, and magic all in one story. Pretty great blend all in all. Originally, this story was part of Marvel's digital Infinite line, though it did end up getting a printing a month after the issue's release, with each issue containing 2 of the digital ones at a time. Infinite, by the way, is not to be confused with Infinity if you're looking this one up. Infinite was actually the previous, I believe, digital line over at Marvel, and Infinity is the current digital line when it comes to Marvel Comics. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to learn more about some cool Doctor Strange stories that you should definitely check out, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Doctor Strange The Oath. This series features art by Marcos Martin and is written by Brian K. Vaughan. Here, Doctor Strange has to solve an attempted murder. His own. In so doing, he uncovers the secret of a fellow colleague, a rival doctor's past, and also attempts to not only battle against the person who wants him dead, but unravel the mystery of why. At the same time, Strange has recently learned that Wong is dying of terminal cancer and seeks to find a cure for his friend. It turns out magical cures and the attempt on his own life are connected in many ways. He learns of the twisted and dark past of someone who was once considered to be a possible inheritor for the Sorcerer Supreme title by his own master, the Ancient One. I don't want to spoil too much, but I will say this one is full of dark deaths and surprising deaths and secrets, and it puts Strange once more in a position where not only does his life hang in the balance, but he is forced to weigh the high cost that it will take to save a dear friend. Number 7. Loki Sorcerer Supreme. Everything is fun and games with Loki until someone gets hurt, or until Stephen Strange ends up possessed by the Void. That is what this story comes down to when Loki manages to trick Dr. Stephen Strange out of his title as Sorcerer Supreme. Loki doesn't believe that Strange has what it takes to protect the Earth, being a human, and being, in Loki's mind, to buy the book when it comes to his magical approach. However, when Strange realizes what has happened, he returns to fight Loki in order to get his title, the Sanctum, and his artifacts back. After their magical capabilities are stripped from them in a fight, Loki, using his super strength, persuades Strange to open a secret door in the Sanctum, which Loki has been unable to access. It's revealed that Stephen can pull off such impressive magical feats because there is a temple dedicated to helping pay the cost for them, and the Sentry is in fact the one tasked currently with aiding him in doing so. And what's behind the door? Sentry's alter ego, the most evil and unstoppable Void, who ends up possessing Stephen as soon as they're released. Yikes. Number 6. Death of Doctor Strange. Death of Doctor Strange is an overarching story and series that really has everything. It is drama, mystery, romance, heartbreak, and of course, lots of horrifying moments just to round it out. I don't want to spoil too much for those who haven't gotten a chance to read this one yet, as it is kind of a more recent story, and maybe you've been wanting to do so, so I'm just going to give you a sense for what this story is about and mention some of its highlights. Death of Doctor Strange is pretty much about, well, what the title says it is, the death of Doctor Strange himself. However, after he dies, this being strange and all, it's revealed that he had some fail-safes in place to help him solve his own murder, in the case that he was murdered. A past version of Strange appears, an older version of him in terms of our chronology, but a younger version in terms of the character's chronology. This version of Strange from the past ends up hot on the case of solving his own murder with the help of magical allies such as Wong and Clea. We are also introduced to the three mothers and their peregrine child, who are all horrifying, by the way. Just the design, just everything. Terrifying. And not only that, but the solution that Strange comes to for how to best deal with his own death, well, it in itself is pretty scary. The real scary bits come in during the last issue, issue number 5, but the whole thing is truly a fantastical roller coaster, and I would recommend that you check it out. Number 5. Duel with the Dread Dormammu. Another classic horrifying tale. This one introduced the terrifying creatures known as the Mindless Ones, and also heavily features Dormammu, who Strange is forced to battle against. You can check it out in issue 127 of the original Strange Tales series, where it is once again a secondary tale. Clea also appears in this story as well as Dormammu's prisoner, trapped because she attempted to warn Strange basically against fighting the Dread Dormammu, ruler of the Dark Dimension. The Mindless Ones are basically faceless super strong monsters who only have a red rectangle where their eyes would normally be, kinda like Cyclops. And much like Psyche of the X-Men, they use those rectangles to emit optic blasts. The story also features a few scary moments where Dormammu attempts to dissolve Strange in combat using magic. Fortunately, our hero is too skilled to allow Dormammu to defeat him so easily, and thanks to the Mindless Ones escaping their confined area within the Dark Dimension, Strange and Clea do manage to escape Dormammu, this time without having to fully defeat him. Although Strange does consider taking Dormammu out for good while his back is turned to them. Wow, that would have changed everything if that had happened. But he ultimately decides against doing that. After all, it's not a really good hero move to stab someone in the back, even if they are your enemy. Number 4. The Last Days of Magic. The Last Days of Magic is a story from Jason Aaron's run on Doctor Strange. You can find it starting in issue number 6 of the 2015 Doctor Strange series. Here, Strange is defeated by the Imperator to start, and the magic users of the world are forced to face off against the Imperator and the Emperucle, who seek to destroy all magic because of the fact that the Imperator lost his parents because, well, they chose to reject magic and instead put their belief and faith in science, which didn't end up very well for them, unfortunately. The Imperator and his robotic army prove to be a powerful force for Strange to combat, and they almost succeed not just in defeating magic users and scaring away the forces of magic for good, but also in burning key magic users, friends, and allies of Stephen the world over. Number 3. Death's Greatest Hits. This story comes from issue 45 of Doctor Strange Sorcerer Supreme, a series which began in 1988 and ran till the mid-90s. Here, Strange ends up seemingly dead, disintegrated in fact, after Galactus' ship is targeted by another craft who happens to be following them down the dimensional corridor. This actually happened in a totally different series prior to this issue, but they fill you in at the beginning, so don't worry if you haven't read everything, you're fine. I love when they do that. Finding a surprising sense of peace in his new surroundings, Strange realizes why he feels so at ease when he runs into Death, as Death has come to claim him and his current allies who were in the midst of a mission actually, so Strange tries to prevent them all from dying by battling Death, which results in the entity tormenting him. To try and remind Stephen of how inevitable death is, they force him to relive the deaths of those who were closest to him, including his sister Donna, who encouraged Stephen to come out swimming with her and some friends at the lake, only for her to get a leg cramp and drown. pretty terrible. The young Steven tried to dive into the water to save his sister, but he ended up failing. In addition to that, he is also forced to relive the death of his brother Vic Strange, who he also feels pretty responsible for. Vic seems to find out that Steven lied to him about being snowed in, and thereby unable to join him, instead deciding to have a date that evening, and simply not wanting to venture out and see his brother, I guess. In a fury, Vic rushes out into the busy New York street after leaving Strange's apartment, only to be killed, struck by a car, and then later revived by Strange, but accidentally brought back as a vampire. Yikes. Number 2. Don't pay the ferryman. Basically, anytime Strange's life is in danger, which happens to be pretty often for the Doctor to be honest, we usually get a pretty horrific scenario. No exception to this standard in the 1974 series of Doctor Strange with the Don't Pay the Ferryman story arc. This story starts in issue 75 and is concluded by issue 81. In it, Strange not only is forced to fight while in his astral form to help fellow surgeons save him when his own life is in peril, but also struggles while on the physical plane with many different mystical and supernatural foes. All of them are quite spooky to behold. While issue 80 is the only one to actually hold the story title of Don't Pay the Ferryman, the trade collecting this whole story also goes by that name overall. Number 1. Finally, Shuma-Gorath. If you thought Dormammu was a piece of work, wait until you meet Shuma-Gorath. He made his first full appearance in issue number 10 of Marvel Premiere, the first volume from 1972. This is also a very important issue for the character of Stephen Strange. It's also a big part of where the character gets really metaphysical. Sure, he's astral projected before, but this time around, he's literally going to jump into his master, the Ancient One's brain, which has been infested by Shuma-Gorath himself. In the end, Stephen realizes to his horror that he must kill his master in order to protect the world and the Ancient One from Shuma-Gorath. He tragically does so, but is later visited by the spirit of the Ancient One, who tells Strange that he is now one with the universe, and that it is time for him to take up the mantle of Sorcerer Supreme in his place.
Number 10. Speed Freak. Speed Freak is a criminal and an addict who killed an inventor and stole his battlesuit in order to become a superpowered addict criminal. His intimidating battlesuit helps him to fly as well as create holographic images and features adamantium cutting blades as well as projectile barbs, which have helped him to go toe-to-toe with the Hulk, even managing to slice open the Hulk's stomach at one point. What makes Speed Freak scary is his lack of humanity, working as a killer for hire in order to feed his addiction. He also shows no care for potential collateral damage, once attacking an AIDS benefit concert in order to try and take out one of his targets. Speed Freak was one of the villains killed in the Stamford incident, a fight between a group of villains and the New Warriors, which resulted in huge amounts of collateral damage and directly led to the Superhero Registration Act and the resulting Civil War. Certainly not the scariest villain on this list, but one I wouldn't want to run into in a dark alley nonetheless. Number 9. The Dogs of War. Developed by the United States military for hunting down the Jade Giant, the Dogs of War were 4 ordinary dogs that were fed gamma-infused meat that transformed them into gamma mutates. They were used to track the Hulk's scent and were trained to attack him when they found him, but being rage-fueled Hulk dogs, they attacked both the Hulk and their military handlers. Now, being attacked by a dog is a horrifying experience under the best of circumstances, but dealing with giant canines with super strength and anger issues is even worse. These paralyzing pooches had only one appearance in Incredible Hulk Volume 2 Issue 14, but they made an impact, being adapted on screen in the criminally underrated Hulk film a couple years later. Number 8. Zax. The first of a few energy drainers on this list, Zax was formed when a group of villains tried to plant a bomb at a nuclear energy plant. Rather than causing an explosion, this caused the energy in the plant's pylon to gain sentience, incinerating the villains and absorbing their intelligence. Zax then went on a rampage, destroying everything and everyone in its path in order to gain as much intelligence as possible. In his first appearance, Zax destroyed several city blocks in the course of a few minutes, killing untold numbers of people and growing 40 feet tall before being confronted by the Hulk. As if that wasn't scary enough, it has also been revealed that incinerating people and stealing their psionic energy is a physically pleasurable experience for the monster. So Zax isn't just killing to gain strength and power, he's also doing it because it feels good. Number 7. Piecemeal. Piecemeal was once a normal man until he was captured and killed by the Red Skull, who wanted to use his body for an evil experiment. The Red Skull's scientists replaced several of his limbs and extremities, turning him into a terrifying beast. Piecemeal eventually escaped from the Red Skull's island and made his way to the mainland with no memories of his previous life. Piecemeal is obviously a pretty scary looking dude, and his superhuman strength and ability to shoot energy blasts make him a formidable foe, but these are not the things that make him terrifying. As he has no memories of his life, Piecemeal wants to experience as much of the spectrum of human emotion as possible. He does this by triggering the emotions of people and then touching them to absorb their emotions and memories, not stopping until the victim is a worn-out husk. One of the ways he triggers people's emotions is by transforming his face to look like them, putting them into a state of shock. He wanted to absorb the Hulk's rage, but was instead impaled and thrown into Loch Ness. This was thought to be the end of the villainous monster, but when the Hulk searched the loch, he could find no body. Was Piecemeal eaten by the Loch Ness monster? Or is he still wandering the earth, draining victims? Number 6. The Quintronic Man. The Quintronic Man is an exosuit that was developed to be piloted by 5 men trained to act as one. Although originally developed for space exploration, it was instead used to battle the Hulk in Incredible Hulk number 213, even managing to beat the Hulk in that issue. While this isn't particularly scary, what puts the Quintronic Man on this list is its later appearance in Indestructible Hulk number 3. In this story, AIM is attempting to reactivate the Quintronic Man for their own nefarious purposes. In order to accomplish this, they reassemble the original 5 pilots. The only issue? 4 of them are dead. Thankfully for AIM, they are able to use electrochemical technology to ensure that the Quintronic Man still has psionic access to the dead pilot's skills and reflexes and can thus use the dead body's muscle memories to control the robot. In layman's terms, this means that the Hulk is being attacked by a robot full of corpses, which is equal parts scary and disturbing. The Quintronic Man puts up quite a struggle against the Hulk, but it meets its end when Hulk pushes it into a volcano. Number 5. Red Hulk. After the death of his daughter at the hands of the Abomination, longtime Hulk enemy Thunderbolt Ross fell into a deep depression that was only worsened by a perceived lack of purpose after the Hulk was shipped off-world in the Planet Hulk storyline. He was approached by MODOK and the Leader, who convinced him to join their evil super team, the Intelligentsia. During the events of World War Hulk, they managed to siphon energy off of the Hulk and transfer it into Ross, transforming him into the Red Hulk. Red Hulk has all of Ross's smarts as well as his legendary temper, but lacks Hulk's compassion, making him a dangerous and terrifying enemy. With the help of a life model decoy, Ross was able to hide his Red Hulk identity for some time, continuing to work for the government while still going on missions for the Intelligentsia. Number 4. Abomination. Emil Blonsky was a communist spy who was working undercover at the same military base as Bruce Banner, working to sabotage the Gamma experiments so that US forces would not become more advanced than the communists. When a distraught Bruce Banner tried to take his own life with a Gamma machine in his lab, Blonsky was there spying on the professor. When Bruce's self-harm attempt was interrupted and he was taken away, Blonsky was hit by the Gamma radiation instead. Like Banner, Blonsky had a strange genetic variation that caused the gamma rays to transform him into the Abomination. Abomination is able to retain his human intelligence and is actually stronger than the Hulk unless the Hulk reaches a state of total enragement. Unlike Banner, Abomination is thrilled with his new form and regularly goes on rampages, killing entire towns. He considers Hulk his equal, as both are disfigured and alone, but when he learned that Bruce had married his longtime sweetheart Betty Ross, he was enraged at the idea that the Hulk was happier than him. In a move of sociopathic pettiness, when Betty was hospitalized, Blonsky injected his blood into her dialysis machine, killing her with gamma poisoning. Number 3. Half-Life. In an origin not dissimilar to the Hulk's, Tony Masterson was an ordinary college professor until he was exposed to a gamma bomb. This turned Masterson into essentially a living corpse who only comes alive at night. He uses his vampiric powers to drain his victim's life force with his touch. When he touches a gamma-powered character, such as the Hulk, he drains their powers rather than their life force. In his first appearance in Incredible Hulk number 334, he tried to drain the Hulk's powers, hoping that they would give him enough life force to be able to stay alive during the day, but Hulk managed to defeat him, ripping his arms off. To the Hulk's shock, Half-Life was still able to use his arms despite them not being attached. He was later given a titanium battlesuit by the leader and very nearly destroyed the Jade Giant, but because he overused his powers in doing so, he ended up in a mummified coma. Number 2. The Wendigo. The Wendigo is a figure from indigenous folklore that was first adapted to Marvel Comics in Incredible Hulk number 162. The curse of the Wendigo is something that happens when a person engages in cannibalism in the Canadian wilderness. The curse causes the person to transform into a vicious creature who has an insatiable hunger for human flesh. In its first comics appearance, the Wendigo is a man named Paul Cartier who goes on a hunting trip with his friends Georges Baptiste and Henri Clouzot. When they are attacked by wolves, the trio are forced to hide in a cave where Henri dies. After 4 days trapped in the cave with no supplies, Georges wakes up and finds Paul eating his friend's remains, inadvertently giving himself the Wendigo curse. Over the years, Wendigo and Hulk clashed several times before Paul's friend Georges managed to transfer the curse to himself, freeing his friend and becoming the second Wendigo. This Wendigo was eventually defeated by Alpha Flight with the help of Wolverine and Nightcrawler. In the years since, several different Wendigos have cropped up in Marvel's Canadian wilderness, each more dangerous than the last. Number 1. Brian Banner. Bruce Banner's father Brian is scary because he is all too real. After being abused by his own father, Brian vowed to never have children. Although an accomplished scientist, Brian struggled with alcoholism and anger issues, and when his wife became pregnant and gave birth to Bruce, he became abusive to both of them. This culminated one Christmas when his wife tried to take Bruce and leave, and Brian killed her. Brian was put in a mental institute as a result until he was released 15 years later. During a confrontation between Bruce and Brian at his mother's grave, the two got into a fight, and Bruce accidentally killed his father. Bruce repressed this memory and spent the next several years believing that his father had been killed in a robbery. As if that weren't bad enough, Bruce was haunted by the ghost of his abusive father until he confronted his father in hell during a period of death in Incredible Hulk 460. Brian is the source of most of Bruce's fears, which proved to be most unfortunate when he was resurrected in the Chaos War as a hybrid of the Devil Hulk and the Guilt Hulk, a dangerous and powerful being who fed off of his son's fear. When that failed and Brian died again, he gained the ability to possess gamma mutates using his influence to control several characters, including Jailbait, Sasquatch, the Absorbing Man, and even the Hulk himself. Even before gaining hellish powers, Brian Banner was the villain that both Bruce Banner and the Hulk were most afraid of. The fact that he now has the ability to control some of Hulk's allies and turn them against him makes him all the more frightening.
Number 10. Spider-Man sells his soul. Spider-Man's One More Day storyline from 2007 was not well received, mostly due to the decision to end Peter Parker and Mary Jane's marriage. In this storyline, Aunt May is fatally shot, and if that wasn't bad enough, in the aftermath of the Civil War, Spidey's secret identity has been exposed. Peter winds up making a deal with the devil himself, the demon lord Mephisto. And the price of reviving Aunt May? Peter agrees to have his history with Mary Jane erased, making it so that they've never even been married in the first place. As a part of this deal, Mephisto also erases the world's collective memory of Spider-Man's secret identity. Editor-in-Chief Joe Quesada has said that the decision-making behind this storyline was based around returning Spider-Man to his roots and preserving the longevity of the character. I guess the writers just didn't want Spidey getting too mature on us being married and everything. Whether you agree with the decision or not, Spidey selling his soul to the devil and throwing away his love is definitely a scary moment. Hey Nerd Squad, if you like these lists and you want to see some more, be sure to hit that like button. Number 9. Daredevil kills Bullseye. In the 2010 series titled Shadowland, we follow Daredevil and some other street-level superheroes as Daredevil returns to Hell's Kitchen and becomes leader of the Hand Ninja Clan. Daredevil builds a temple/prison in Hell's Kitchen, and his methods start to become a lot more extreme. After Bullseye slays Elektra, Daredevil is pushed to the edge and gives chase, catching up with Bullseye, and the two wind up dangling from a power cable. Despite the opportunity to easily pull his adversary up to safety, Daredevil instead chooses to drop Bullseye to his death in a surprisingly dark moment. This leads to a conflict involving Spider-Man, Luke Cage, and more. This story also introduces a new Power Man to the Marvel Universe. It's later revealed that Daredevil is actually possessed by the Beast of the Hand, explaining his erratic and extreme behavior. Bullseye is later revealed to still be alive, but seeing evil Daredevil heart heartlessly kill him was definitely a scary Marvel moment. Number 8. Peter Parker dug up Gwen Stacy's corpse. In Spider-Man's Sins Past storyline, a mysterious mistake from Gwen Stacy's past comes back to haunt our favorite wall crawler, in a story that is all at once scary, bizarre, and emotional. It begins with a strange letter from Gwen that was written long ago. Pete only has the first page, so at first it really doesn't make much sense. However, after being attacked by two masked figures at Gwen Stacy's grave in the cemetery, things start to become more clear. The rest of the letter reveals that Gwen Stacy had a secret affair with Norman Osborn before she died. It's an awful reveal and an emotional story for Spidey, and it's punctuated by this scene where we see Peter Parker preparing to dig up Gwen's corpse to get some DNA. Fans were really not impressed or very happy to see Gwen's past tarnished like this, and honestly, the whole story just kind of takes away from the impact of Gwen Stacy's death. Number 7. Wolverine kills his son. In the Uncanny X-Force, we see one of Wolverine's darkest moments. When his son Daken returns from the dead, he plans to destroy the X-Force by creating a new brotherhood of mutants. Daken was raised by Romulus and abandoned by Wolverine, so he grew up with all the physical aspects of Wolverine, but without the moral code. Daken doesn't like that his father has helped to create the new school for young mutants, and Daken has vowed to kill every student that they take in. This is pretty much the limit for Wolverine. It's the last straw, and frustrated and ashamed of his reckless son, he finishes him off by drowning him in some shallow water, one of the few ways to kill someone with a powerful healing factor. As he kills Daken, Wolverine romantically imagines a different future for his son in a scene that is all at once tragic, scary, and just kind of weird. Number 6. Wolverine killed his dad. Even in his youth, Logan was a killer. In the limited series called The Origin, we learn more of Wolverine's history. He grew up as the son of the wealthy John and Elizabeth Howlett, and he spent most of his time in bed with an unknown illness, some form of asthma or something like that. Mutant stuff, you know. His mother was secretly having an affair with their groundskeeper Thomas Logan. After he is expelled from the manor for his misdeeds, he later returns to attempt to rob the place, and he begs Elizabeth to run away with him. However, the husband shows up, and Thomas blasts him with a shotgun. Young Logan actually witnesses all of this, and it sends him into his first ever berserker rage, his bone claws popping out as he lunges forward and stabs Thomas to death. It's heavily implied that the groundskeeper could be Logan's biological father, so his rage-induced revenge kill is actually him killing his own father. It's implied anyways. Number 5. Spidey gave Mary Jane cancer. Much like The Dark Knight Returns, this story showed us a much older Peter Parker returning to form and his life of crime fighting as Spider-Man. It's actually J. Jonah Jameson who winds up helping get Spidey out of his slump, giving him a mask and inspiring him to get back into action. Throughout this story, Peter keeps on having flashbacks and visions of the long-deceased MJ, and it's only later in the story we find out the real reason. MJ died of cancer long ago. The worst part? The cancer was actually caused by Peter's radioactive blood. He infected MJ himself through fluid transmission. This is an awful memory that old Pete is stuck with and makes this one scary and a tragedy. Number 4. Spidey becomes a zombie, eats Mary Jane and Aunt May. This one comes from Marvel Zombies and is a really uncomfortable moment. Spider-Man is swinging around the city when he spots Ash Williams holding a chainsaw and shotgun. Ash tells Spidey about the journey that he's been on from the gates of heaven where a zombified sentry punched him down into this world. The two of them then witness that sentry biting and infecting other superheroes like Luke Cage and Hawkeye. Ash later explains that the source of the problem is the Necronomicon, and they make some plans to search for it. But unfortunately, Spider-Man is then bitten and later punched by Ash, dislocating his jaw. Spidey, now bitten by a zombie with a dislocated jaw, sees this destruction taking place in the city and heads off to find Mary Jane and Aunt May to ensure their safety. At this point, he finishes transforming into a zombie, and when he arrives, eats Aunt May and MJ in a horrifying scene. Number 3. Wolverine ripped in half by the Hulk. In Ultimate Wolverine vs. Hulk Part 1, we see Wolverine missing the bottom half of his body. Nick Fury has tasked Logan with hunting down and killing the Hulk. Using a stool sample taken from the Hulk, he tracks the Green Giant down and battles him in the Himalayas. The Hulk winds up literally ripping Logan in two and tossing his legs up the mountain about 4 miles away. Wolverine, with his infamous healing factor, has a flashback explaining all of this while he climbs up the mountain using just his claws. When he finally reaches the peak, he finds the Hulk chilling up there with a harem of women just waiting and ready for round 2. The whole thing is super epic with no shortage of action-packed moments, but seeing Wolverine get torn in two like a piece of paper really leaves an impression. Number 2. Giant Man and the Blob in Ultimatum. The Marvel Ultimate series is full of grotesque over-the-top moments, and it's awesome. Seriously, it was kind of hard to choose just one. It's always fun reading alternate universes where your favorite characters can die, stuff gets blown up, and it just stays that way. However, in Ultimatum, the book made to sort of tidy up everything that had happened so far, things get really crazy. In one scene, we see the Wasp reduced to nothing more than a late-night snack for the Blob, munching away on her like a hungry wolf. She was already dead and only being eaten by him, but still, it was pretty messed up. As an added bonus, the Blob is quickly eaten himself by Giant Man, who bursts into a rage, grabs him, and just bites the Blob's head clean off. The whole thing is nasty and unceremonious, but these kind of deaths are exactly what the Ultimate series is all about. And here we are at number 1. The Punisher guts the leader of a trafficking ring. The number of scary things the Punisher has done could easily be on its own list, but this act definitely belongs here. In the Punisher Max series, things really get cranked up to the next level. This series had some of the most gory images ever posted in comics. Headshots with brain splatter, entrails hanging out, you name it. But the worst has gotta be this guy, who Frank Castle decided to really take his time with. Christo Bulat, the leader of a sex trafficking group called the Slavers, meets a seriously dark end at the hands of the Punisher. After hunting and killing all the other members, he keeps Christo alive to extract information from him. His method? He disembowels the guy and wraps his intestines around a tree in one of the goriest comic scenes I've ever seen.
Number 10 becomes heroes. And I'm not just talking about Moon Knight here. You see, there was a time Moon Knight was actually a part of the Avengers. Well, the Secret Avengers. But still, afterwards in his own 2011 series, he decided to go off to LA. Moon Knight actually ended up turning his life into a television series, or, well, his early life. But while that was going on, he was called back into action by some of his fellow Avengers, who said they needed his help with something. Problem was, the Avengers who appeared to be here weren't actually there. Instead, it was revealed that they were hallucinations of Moon Knights, who actually also ended up becoming them in a way. They became personas that manifested within him, and which he at times adopted himself, fighting and actually acting under the guise and mantle of those heroes. The heroes that he imagined and which became a fractured part of his psyche were Captain America, Wolverine, and Spider-Man. Number 9. Death. That first death of Mark Spector in both versions is a quite disturbing scene. The story goes that after being betrayed by Raul Bushman and defending Marlene Alraine, daughter of archaeologist Peter Alraine, whom Bushman had killed, Mark was seemingly left dead in the desert. He was brought in to rest under the idol of Khonshu inside, or perhaps in front, of an ancient tomb. Despite being declared dead with no discernible pulse or heartbeat, somehow Mark made a miraculous recovery, and it is heavily implied in that first telling of the tale in issue number 1 of the 1980 Moon Knight series that his recovery is actually thanks to the spiritual and supernatural. In the 2016 series retelling of this moment, Khonshu actually speaks directly to Mark and offers him life or death. When Mark chooses life, Khonshu then reveals that as a result of his gift, Mark will actually act as his hands, his eyes, his vengeance. Very eerie stuff. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want even more Moon Knight lists, you know that there is much more to talk about. Be sure to let us know and we will give that to you. Hit that like button, friends. Do it. Number 8. Unkillable Moon Knight. One of the scariest things about Moon Knight in general as a character is that he's so completely relentless and seemingly unstoppable. It makes you question if he's really human and sometimes if he's even real. Moon Knight has at times questioned whether or not Khonshu is real or a hallucination, and he's also wrestled with the personas residing within him as he tries to navigate the truth about who he is as a person. There was also a time that he even claimed he wasn't real, messing with the minds of readers and opponents alike. In issue number 2 of the 2014 Moon Knight series, Moon Knight is chasing down an opponent, being fired at continuously as he pursues. While he is grazed by one of the bullets, he also seems to impossibly dodge them otherwise, and this is as his enemy empties his clips, right into him, pulling out a series of guns in an effort to hit and take out Moon Knight. The man he's after asks, "Why can't I hit you?" To which Mark replies, "I'm not real." Number 7. Mummified. Well, I mean, not fully mummified, organs still intact, but wrapped up like a mummy and the prisoner of Anubis for sure. This frightening moment comes from when Mark Spector had reluctantly answered the call of Khonshu once more after choosing to retire. Coming out of retirement, he felt compelled to follow an urge, almost like a telepathic pull, which led him to priests of Khonshu, who armed him for the coming battles after Mark had sworn off being Moon Knight and sold his Khonshu idol statue. This puts him into direct conflict with Anubis, who literally had him confined in mummy wrap as he threatened to blast him with laser-like eyes, defeating Khonshu's avatar and killing Mark Spector in the process. At least, that was his plan. Fortunately, Mark did escape with some help from Khonshu, but unfortunately this also meant that Mark was now indebted to Khonshu once more. Number 6. Facing Morpheus. Morpheus, once known as Robert Markham, was a patient of Peter Alrain's, not to be confused with the other Peter Alrain Sr., who's Marlene's dad. This Peter Alrain is Peter Alrain Jr., who is Marlene's brother. Robert himself was struggling with a viral infection which affected his very DNA, and decided to seek medical treatment. After Peter prescribed him an experimental drug, he became mutated. His appearance changed to something quite monstrous, and he found himself unable to sleep, and he also had powers. His powers were mainly psionic and also allowed him to control and interact with dreams of those who slept. At one point, he also managed to be able to exert control over minds that were awake as well. This monstrous being proved a challenging foe for Moon Knight to face, and just the idea and appearance of him could haunt you in a lingering way. Kinda like how a horror film does. Number 5. Daddy Khonshu. One of the creepiest visits I think Mark has gotten from Khonshu is still the first one, especially as this visit only highlights the fact that we're not really sure at this point if Khonshu is completely real or simply a manifestation of Mark's psyche, like his other identities. Khonshu first visited Mark when he was just a boy, and his father was meeting with a specialist about getting Mark treatment for his dissociative identity disorder, which Elias had noticed manifesting through Mark talking to seemingly imaginary friends. Makes me actually wonder if that is a sign of DID or not. I had a lot of imaginary friends when I was a kid, and is having imaginary friends an early sign of the potential to develop something like DID? I had like 3 or 4 of them growing up myself. As Mark listens to the door to hear what his father and the doctor are saying to one another, he's approached by someone who turns out to be Khonshu. Khonshu doesn't just say hi or even boo, but instead disturbingly claims that he is Mark's true father. Oh boy. Number 4. Branding. And not in a marketing way. Well, I guess it's kind of a form of marketing actually. Really disturbing form of marketing perhaps. This revelation comes to us from the 2006 volume of Moon Knight, which is a lot more edgelordy from what I've seen of it personally. Here Moon Knight takes to marking his victims by carving a crescent moon into their forehead. Reminiscent of DCEU Batman branding his criminals with the bat symbol, but a lot more gruesome, because you're literally carving something into their forehead. This really showcases how Moon Knight uses fear and intimidation to fight against criminals, and also feels that he is so in the right that he gets to decide who should live or die, or be like permanently branded. This is definitely a version of the character, or more a time in Moon Knight's life, where he really didn't seem to care about killing. I mean, I know Moon Knight kills when he needs to kill, but there's pretty much no remorse shown here either. And usually Moon Knight does kinda try to not kill when he can. To see Moon Knight mark people's foreheads with crescent moons, check out issue 16 of the 2006 Moon Knight series, where he does quite a bit of it. It's pretty dark. Number 3. The Hatchet Man. Being that Moon Knight is such a dark figure himself, he also faces off against a lot of dark and violent rogues. Very similar to Batman actually. Dealing with a lot of criminals who are much more twisted, dark, and brutal. One such villain was the Hatchet Man, who initially Mark believed was none other than Randall Spector, his own brother. In fact, when the Hatchet Man is defeated in issue 18 of the 1978 Hulk series, Mark is pretty convinced that it was his brother. Of course, I'm pretty sure his brother shows up later alive, so I'm not really sure if this was actually true or just a coincidence, or how this fits into the greater continuity. Either way, before he is defeated, the Hatchet Man's MO was using an axe, a hatchet, to slay innocent nurses as they headed home later after their night shifts. And the reason Randall was suspected as the Hatchet Man by Moon Knight was because of a past incident where he killed a woman named Lisa with a meat cleaver, which Mark himself recalled. Axe-wielding serial killers, that is some scary stuff. It should also be noted that Marlene, Mark Mark's love interest, is used as bait in the plan, and when everything goes sideways, she ends up hacked multiple times with the axe, putting her in a life-threatening condition. Number 2. Dark Secrets. Probably the moment that resulted in Mark developing a dissociative identity order to begin with. This one comes from his childhood. Mark's father, Elias, emigrated from the United States when he was younger with his own mother in the hopes of escaping persecution for being Jewish. A family friend and rabbi joined them and assisted them along the way by the name of Yitz Perlman. The problem was that Yitz Perlman wasn't really Yitz Perlman at all, but a man impersonating him who had deserted the German World War II forces and was also looking to escape himself. The fake Perlman, it turned out, was actually named Ernst, and was also a serial killer who preyed on Jews specifically, or more enjoyed that. That was more the thing that he liked the best. Which young Mark one day happened to find out by accident. He managed to escape Perlman's clutches, only for Perlman to disappear afterward, once more escaping justice. Number 1. Face Off. If you're familiar with Moon Knight and Mark Spector, then you know that Raoul Bushman is one of his greatest enemies in the comics. Bushman in the comics is the one who basically is responsible for Mark becoming Moon Knight in the first place. At least, that's how it initially went. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that was added after, but initially, he was a big part of that. He was the one who seemingly killed Spectre, who was then laid to rest beneath an idol of Khonshu and miraculously recovered, becoming his avatar. This was after Bushman betrayed the group that he and Mark were both a part of, looking to take the riches of one of their expeditions for himself, and threatening the life of the woman whom Mark would later fall in love with after killing her father. At one point, Raoul and Moon Knight face off against one another in a brutal fight, where despite getting both of his knees shattered, Moon Knight still managed to defeat Bushman, and even removes his face using one of his crescent moon darts.
At number 10 is the obvious Venom. Born from the unholy union of an alien symbiote and the embittered reporter Eddie Brock, this malevolent force emerged as an embodiment of Peter Parker's absolute worst fears. In the comics, Venom's sinister plot unfurled in the shadowy corners of New York City as he relentlessly pursued a vendetta against our friendly neighborhood hero. Armed with intimate knowledge of Peter's life, Venom's malevolence reached chilling heights. He would haunt Aunt May's doorstep, casting an eerie shadow over her once safe haven, and sent shivers down Mary Jane's spine in the very home she shared with the web-slinger. Now, while Venom recently has undergone a reluctant transformation into an anti-hero, his origins continue to haunt Spider-Man's psyche, proving even that in the world of comics, nightmares can endure. At number 9 is Morbius the Living Vampire. Introduced in 1971 with the Amazing Spider-Man 101, Morbius is no ordinary vampire. He's a scientist turned blood-sucking bad boy due to a failed experiment which aimed to extend his life by curing his rare red bodily fluid disease. This tragic transformation adds depth to his character, making him both terrifying and sympathetic. And fun fact, Morbius actually appears during that same story arc that had Spider-Man grow 2 extra pairs of arms. Yup, the 6-arm saga, which is terrifying in itself, saw Spider-Man accidentally give himself extra limbs after trying to get rid of his powers, because that flows logically, but he only managed to cure himself thanks to an enzyme in the vampire. Anyways, Morbius's blend of science and horror taps into our fear of losing control over our humanity. Battles with Spider-Man challenge not just the hero's physical abilities, but also his moral compass. This complex antagonist pushes us to ponder the boundaries of good and evil. And if you're enjoying this video so far, you can support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. At number 8 is the Demogoblin. One can't help but shudder at the sinister transformation of the Hobgoblin into the Demogoblin. I mean, the Hobgoblin was already scary enough, just jeez. This haunting tale unfolds when the Hobgoblin, desperate for the power to vanquish the Wallcrawler once and for all, entertains a diabolical bargain with Nazareth, a demon of malevolent stature. But rather than directly claiming his soul, Nazareth opts for an unholy possession, forever intertwining the Hobgoblin with this demonic entity. Within the Hobgoblin's shell, an otherworldly struggle ensues, leading to the expulsion of the infernal force. Yet, instead of retreating to the abyss, the vanquished demon materializes as this ghastly Demogoblin. Driven by an inexplicable yearning for redemption, the Demogoblin embarks on a ghastly crusade targeting sinners of all kinds, from ruthless unalivers to mere fibbers, as it seeks to carve its way back to the celestial realm. This spine-tingling saga showcases the chilling depths Marvel Comics can plunge into in pursuit of the scariest Spider-Man villains. And speaking of which, at number 7 is Sin Eater. Eater. In the Marvel Comics universe, not all villains are flashy superpowered beings. Meet Stanley Carter, for instance, a former S.H.I.E.L.D. agent turned NYPD officer who snapped after his partner's demise, who perished in the line of duty, and Stanley Carter became the chilling serial unaliver known as the Sin Eater, who vowed to take out those he felt were sinners. His victims included a police captain, a judge, and even a priest, with Spider-Man nearly crossing his own moral line in the process. Now, what sets Sin Eater apart is his lack of interest in being a traditional supervillain. He's a remorseless vigilante driven solely by a dark sense of justice, making him one of Spider-Man's most disturbing adversaries. At number 6 is the Lizard. Enter Dr. Curt Connors, a brilliant army surgeon who paid a steep price for his dedication to saving lives. After losing his arm in the crucible of battle, Connors embarked on a desperate quest to regrow his missing limb. And his solution? A serum rooted in the DNA of reptiles, a decision that would forever change his destiny. The consequences were chilling. The serum transformed Connors into the grotesque Lizard, a hulking reptilian menace devoid of self-control. With his psyche imprisoned, Dr. Connors became a nightmarish force of nature, leaving destruction in his wake. Though Spider-Man made an antidote to quell his reptilian rampage, the specter of the Lizard continues to haunt Dr. Connors, persisting as one of Spider-Man's most poignant and terrifying foes. At number 5 is Vermin. Edward Wayland, a genius geneticist who endured a harrowing upbringing under the cruel hand of his father, but ultimately Edward's brilliance would serve as the catalyst for his descent into the abyss of villainy. It was a sinister alliance with Baron Zemo and Primus that sealed his gruesome fate. Subjected to a diabolical experiment, Edward emerged as the grotesque Vermin, a rat-like abomination with the insatiable appetite for human flesh. Now, Vermin lurks in the murky depths of Manhattan sewers, a denizen of the city's darkest underbelly. His once brilliant mind has been cruelly eroded, unable to even remember the life he once had. At number 4 is the Swarm. In the web of Marvel's Rogues Gallery, there exists a truly spine-tingling villain born from the annals of macabre imagination. Fritz von Meyer, an evil scientist with sinister ambitions, sought refuge in the depths of South America following the tumultuous end of World War II, and we can all guess which side he was on. His post-war existence, however, took a bizarre twist when he donned the mantle of a humble beekeeper, but fate had a malevolent design in store for Fritz. Beneath the tropical canopy, he stumbled upon a colony of bees, oddly mutated by some sinister force. In a grisly turn of events, Fritz's quest to subdue the colony led to his untimely demise as he was devoured alive by the very creatures he sought to control. All that remained in the end were his skeletal remains, yet his tale doesn't end there. In a truly nightmarish turn, the bees actually absorbed Fritz's consciousness, merging his with the swarming hive mind of their own, and the result was an abomination known as Swarm, a being composed of thousands of bees acting in macabre unison, each dancing to the nightmarish symphony of Fritz's malevolent will. At number 3, the Thousand. In the comics, few Spider-Man villains are as unsettling as Carl King, who actually started off as one of Peter's high school bullies alongside Flash. Now, he was one of the few who actually witnessed Peter Parker's spider bite, and then was the only one who witnessed Peter's newfound powers thereafter. And so he sought similar powers and actually went on to eat the radioactive spider that bit Peter in the first place. Kind of a weird way of doing it. And so instead of acquiring new abilities, he transformed into the Thousand, a nightmarish collective of cyclically linked spiders. These spiders infiltrate and control victims by consuming them from the inside. Carl's mother was the first victim, but many followed thereafter. The Thousand is a chilling reminder that in the Spider-Man universe, true terror often arises from unexpected sources, making them the most spine-tingling foes in the Web-Slingers Rogues Gallery. At number 2 is Carnage, also known as Cletus Cassidy, a name that chills the spine, because he's a man whose descent into darkness was inevitable. Born without superpowers, he wielded the horrific potential within his twisted soul. See, it all began when he was just a child, committing his first heinous act by sending his grandmother tumbling down a staircase. Just a glimpse into the malevolence that lay dormant beneath this character's psyche. The St. Estes Home for Boys, an ill-fated refuge, failed to contain his rage. The disciplinarian administration administration met their grim end at his hands, and a poor girl met her doom beneath the wheels of a bus, and thereafter he left the orphanage reduced to smoldering ruins. Cassidy's score count probably spiraled into the dozens by this point. But his benevolence met its match when he found himself behind the bars of Rikers Island, sharing a cell with none other than Eddie Brock. Venom's chaotic escape left an indelible mark as a fragment of the symbiote left behind by Venom had merged with Cassidy, birthing none other than the monstrous Carnage. From then on, the nightmare had only begun, unleashing a new terror upon an unsuspecting world. And at number 1 is Green Goblin. In the annals of Marvel Comics, few villains send shivers down the spine quite like Norman Osborn, unwitting creator of the maniacal Green Goblin. A quest for strength and intellect led to a catastrophic incident, granting Osborn great power but also shattering his sanity. As the Green Goblin, Osborn became not just Spider-Man's nemesis, but a threat to the entire Marvel universe. His reign of terror left a grim trail of casualties, none more tragic than the unaliving of Gwen Stacy, Peter Parker's main love interest, which was a cold-hearted act just to torment Spider-Man. The Green Goblin's unpredictability, cunning, and ruthlessness make him one of Marvel's most enduring and fearsome foes, a chilling reminder of the darkness lurking in Spider-Man's world.
Number 10, Deadpool. To ease our way onto this list, I figured we'd start with a less intense one. Wade Wilson was a Canadian who moved from Canada and joined the Special Forces and later became a CIA assassin until he fell in love with the mutant Vanessa Carlyle. Things were good for a while until he developed 34 inoperable cancerous tumors. He left Vanessa and returned home to die. He was recruited into the infamous Weapon X program and given a healing factor which caused the cancer cells to multiply, leaving him hideously disfigured. This disfigurement varies a bit on its intensity depending on the version of the character, with him running the gamut between somewhat lumpy to full-on Freddy Krueger. Personally, I prefer when Deadpool's deformity looks as gross as possible, as it's a big part of the character and why he typically keeps his face hidden by his mask. Deadpool's deformity in the comic books has been known to cause the characters who see it to scream, faint, or sometimes even throw up at the sight of it. Number 9, Vampire Batman. This one is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. In Batman and Dracula Red Reign, Batman fights Dracula and is transformed into a vampire. He is able to control his bloodlust and continue to protect Gotham until the events of the sequel, Batman Bloodstorm. In this book, the Joker ends up killing Catwoman, causing Batman to finally snap and feed on the Joker. He has a stake driven through his heart to prevent more bloodlust, but it actually only puts him in a coma, and he is revived in Batman Crimson Mist when Gotham is overwhelmed by crime. Unfortunately, his condition has worsened, and he has lost whatever was left of his human mind, and he goes about hunting down and feeding on his entire rogues gallery, leaving a trail of carnage and destruction in his wake. Things get even worse by the events of Countdown Presents The Search for Ray Palmer, Red Reign #1, when we learn that he has stopped only going after bad guys and is now attacking anyone he comes across, and is actually responsible for the deaths of this universe's Dick Grayson, and is assembling his own vampire bat family. Number 8, the Wendigo. The Wendigo is a figure from indigenous folklore that was first adapted to Marvel Comics in Incredible Hulk number 162. The curse of the Wendigo is something that happens when a person engages in in the Canadian wilderness. The curse causes the person to transform into a vicious creature who has an insatiable hunger for human flesh. In its first comics appearance, the Wendigo is a man named Paul Cartier, who goes on a hunting trip with his friends Georges Baptiste and Henri Clouzot. When they are attacked by wolves, the trio are forced to hide in a cave where Henri dies. After 4 days trapped in the cave with no supplies, Georges wakes up and finds Paul eating his friend's remains, inadvertently giving himself the Wendigo curse. Over the years, Wendigo and Hulk clashed several times before Paul's friend George managed to transfer the cure to himself, freeing his friend and becoming the second Wendigo. This Wendigo was eventually defeated by Alpha Flight with the help of Wolverine and Nightcrawler. In the years since, several different Wendigos have cropped up in Marvel's Canadian wilderness, each one more dangerous than the last. Number 7, Franken Castle. The Punisher is a scary guy at the best of times, but for a brief window, he was actually even more spooky. After Frank was killed and sliced to pieces by Daken, Man-Thing and the Moloids recovered the bits and took them to the Legion of Monsters and everyone's favorite character in all of fiction, Dr. Michael Morbius. They turned Frank into a patchwork Frankenstein's monster-type creature in hopes that he would help them fight the Hellsguard. He refused at first, but after witnessing their atrocities firsthand, used his new size and strength to help the Legion of Monsters. His time as a big old monster was cut short when he was returned to normal by Elsa Bloodstone. Number 6. Spider-Man becomes a Spider-Man. In the Changes arc that ran in Spectacular Spider-Man Volume 2, issues 17 through 20, Spider-Man went through a rather awful transformation. A bug-themed villain known as the Queen had decided that she wanted Spidey to be her mate, and rather than sliding into his DMs, she gave him a kiss that caused the spider DNA in him to go haywire. Over the next few issues, he went through a transformation not dissimilar to Jeff Goldblum's Brundlefly, as he slowly started to transform into an actual giant spider. At first, the transformation was relatively subtle, with him growing extra eyes that he could hide with a pair of sunglasses, but it wasn't long until he got brown and fuzzy and sprouted some extra arms and fangs. In the final issue of the arc, he is full on just a giant spider, but things somehow get even wilder when the spider keels over dead and a naked Peter bursts out of the arachnid's body, effectively giving birth to himself. Once out of the spider, Peter has additional spider powers such as organic web powers, causing him to no longer need his web shooters. This comic came out in 2004 in the midst of the Tobey Maguire films, so I'm guessing this was done in an effort to make comic Spidey more like his film counterpart. But there had to be an easier way to give Peter new spider powers than making him go through all of that. Number 5. Joker takes his face off. I'm not gonna linger on this one too long. In the Death of the Family arc, the Joker decides it's time to update his look. He enlists the help of the villain Dollmaker and allows him to remove the Joker's face. Joker then escapes before returning a year later and stealing back his face from the police evidence locker. He crudely straps it back onto himself and begins a plan to kill all of Batman's sidekicks so he and Bats can get back to basics. There's a moment where he tricks the Bat family into thinking he's taken off all of their faces, but that turns out to be a ruse. So yeah, he took off his face and it looked pretty spooky. What more can I say? Number 4. The Thousand. The Thousand was a Spider-Man villain who only ever made one story appearance. Granted, it was a very memorable appearance. Carl King was one of Peter Parker's classmates from kindergarten all the way through high school. Whenever Flash Thompson was busy, it was Carl that was making Peter's life miserable. Carl was on the same school field trip as Peter when he saw the radioactive spider bite Pete. He followed Peter home thinking he'd get to see Peter get sick or something, but instead saw him leap out of the way of a car and onto the wall, discovering his spider powers. Carl followed Spider-Man's early career and became jealous, thinking that it should have been him that got the awesome powers. So he broke into the lab to try and replicate the incident, but of course had no idea how to irradiate a spider. The original spider was being kept as a specimen, so Carl figured his best bet was to just eat it. This transformed him into 1,000 sentient spiders who absorbed his consciousness and ate his insides, leaving nothing but a hollow skin. He soon transferred to his parents, killing them, and then spent the next few years hopping from body to body. Him transferring between bodies is a pretty disturbing sight, and his narcissism and hatred for Spider-Man makes him a terrifying villain, even if he only appeared in one story before dying. Number 3. The Immortal Hulk. I will always recommend Immortal Hulk to anyone who is a fan of the Jade Giant for several reasons. It brings Hulk back to a darker, more character-based approach, it has a great supporting cast, the art is great, and it's scary as hell. Throughout the series, plenty of characters go through awful transformations, like Rick Jones's weird two-headed abomination or Absorbing Man getting torn in half. But today I want to focus on this book's approach to Banner's transformations into the Hulk. Typically, when Banner hulks out in the comics, the transformation is relatively simple. His skin turns green and he starts to swell up to Hulk size. he's just growing. It looks painful, and I'm sure it would be terrifying to see in real life, but Immortal Hulk takes a slightly different approach. In these transformations, it's like Banner and Hulk are bursting out of each other. A mouth will appear out of a shoulder, and an arm will sprout out of a stomach, and the panels showing the transition between the two characters are brutal and terrifying. Number 2, Zombie Superman. I've talked about Marvel Zombies a few times recently, and I really am just not in the mood, so instead I'm going to talk about the DC equivalent, Deceased. In this mini-series, the anti-life equation infects the computer screens of the world, causing everyone who sees them to turn into a shambling corpse that wants to bite people to spread the infection, or, failing that, kill everyone in sight. A lot of the DC heroes are transformed with lethal results, including most of the Bat family, Batman himself, Hal Jordan, and The Flash. But as scary as these versions of the former heroes are, there are none as pants-crappingly terrifying as Zombie Superman. Once Superman gets infected, he goes on a rampage, leveling cities with his heat vision and not holding back his powers at all. Wonder Woman has to forge a magic sword of kryptonite to try and stop him, and it's still not enough. As a pair of space arcs tries to get away, Superman pursues, planning on ending the species. It isn't until the entire Green Lantern Corps shows up that he relents, calculating that he can't beat them all. Instead, he flies into the sun to feed off of it so that anyone left on Earth will soon die. And you thought Justice Superman was scary. Number 1, the Batman who laughs. When the Joker of Earth 22 found out he was dying, he decided to go on one last spree in order to attempt to send Batman over the edge. He killed all of the other supervillains in Gotham as well as Jim Gordon. He blew up several buildings and captured Batman. He forced the Dark Knight to watch as he ended the parents of kidnapped children right in front of them before infecting them with Joker toxin. In order to stop the madness, Batman broke free and broke the Clown Prince's neck. When he did this, Batman was inadvertently exposed to a Joker toxin, which corrupted his mind and gave him the Joker's sick, twisted sense of humor and murderous desires. This Batman went on to kill the Bat family as well as the entire Justice League before using his evil cunning to take over and destroy his world. He was recruited to lead the group of evil Batmen in the evil cosmic being Barbados' plan to destroy the multiverse, but was defeated when the main universe's Batman did the one thing the Batman who laughs could not predict, and teamed up with the Joker to save the universe.